This is the Writers Are People 2 podcast, where I just can't get writers to shut up. Tonight, we have with us a man of many creative disciplines, Jeff Carroll. So tell me a little bit about yourself, including how you got started on your creative journey.
I like to say I'm a fan with a pen. Before I started writing, I was a really big fan of stories. I grew up going to movies on 42nd Street. I'm from New York, so I went to grindhouse movies. I really wasn't a big reader. Writing became a means to an end for me, and now I enjoy it. But I started off as a lover of stories from film, and that is like from young, very early age. I was 9 and 10. I went to see Star Wars at 11. So that started my journey. My father took me. Shout out. All right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I was in those big crowds, but it was a crowd for the whole summer. So I had to be a part of some of it.
Well, did you get dressed up?
No, I mean, I didn't know what I was going to see. However, I know I imagined flying the Millennium Falcon after I saw it. That was like something that totally resonated with me. But yeah, I am a fan with a pen, and I write for myself at 17 or 18 years old. So I write for all ages, but mostly people 30, 40 or older who still like the things that they liked when they were children.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah, I never really want to grow up. I have responsibilities, but I don't want to grow up. And, you talk about Star Wars. I distinctly remember I was probably 4 or 5 or something, and my dad took me over to my uncle's house, and we watched Star Wars movie. I don't know exactly which one it was at the time, but I have a feeling it was The Empire Strikes Back. Because I just remember Darth Vader standing there kind of in this dark glow with some lights around his feet, and I was really scared when I was, 5 or 6. But love Star Wars, so I love your creative side as well. What is RBG Promotions?
So I started off as a reviewer of movies. When I was in college, really when I was in high school, I used to go to the Apollo Theater and cover amateur night. And when I got to college, I said, hey, I still want to do this writing stuff. And for some reason, I had a connection, the newspaper that had did my articles on the Apollo Theater Amateur Night series. I got invited to House Party and the movie with Kid and Play. And I reviewed that movie, and it was fun. And then I started getting invited to other movies. And that's where the Red, Black, and Green Promotions came from. Red, Black, and Green is just like the Black Flag, Marcus Garvey and stuff like that. And I just wanted to promote, at the time, the term diversity was probably new. So I was trying to promote that, which was Black and diverse. And I then graduated into writing bios, and then I started doing my own live entertainment, and I worked with comedians from Def Comedy Jam and Def Poetry Poets, and I actually worked with them before the shows. And when the shows came out, I was like, what's the next level? And I said, hey, let's make some movies. And I started getting them into movies, and I said, I can write movies better than the ones I'm getting them into. So we made our own movie. And that was my first movie. Holla If I Kill You was my first commercial writing project.
Okay.
Before any of my books, I started off with that movie.
So you've made, was it 6 films by now?
Yes.
And are those feature lengths? Are they short films?
They're all features. They're all successful enough to get on streaming platforms. I think 5 of them are definitely on Tubi and other platforms, and The Black Nun rotates because it has a different distributor. But it's been on
so
Tubi.
I had a question.
It's on Amazon now, I think.
Okay, got it. So yeah, I was going to ask how you disseminate them. So you said Tubi. I'm unfamiliar with that. Is that kind of like Netflix?
No, Tubi is a free platform. Think YouTube before they changed their system. So
Okay.
But with Tubi you still need a distributor. It's hard to get it up there on your own. But yeah, think like YouTube with a distributor, and
Okay,
that's really
so
what it is.
what's your role on these then? Are you writer, director, producer? Like, do you do all of it?
So I was writer and producer on the first three films, and I actually say, I could get director credit on the third film, but the fourth, fifth, and sixth, I definitely directed myself. You know,
Awesome. And are those are all sci-fis?
no. So the first movie, they're all horrors, right? Because
Okay.
I at the time, and still, I have like horror stories in my mind for film. But the first one is "Holla If I Kill You," and that's about a comedian who has a fall from grace, and people start getting killed at the nightclub. And then I have Gold Digger Killer, which was my first film that I entered in film festivals, and it won. So that's my award-winning film. It won 3 film awards, and that's a to-be classic. The next one was The Death Pledge, and I was the last one before I really took the director's chair, and that's like my ode to Jason and Michael Myers. It's my mask serial killer. And then I have Conjuring Baba, and then another one called Stay Out. Conjuring Baba is the killer in the Death Pledge. So Conjuring Baba is like I one of my favorite movies is Freddy vs. Jason. So I wanted to pit my Jason against another supernatural, and I pitted him against a genie. So that's
Mhm.
Conjuring Baba. And then Stay Out is kind of my little frustration with Jordan Peele. So I loved Get Out and I hated Us. So I combined both of those and I did Stay Out. My next one was the the Black Nun, and then I know I'm missing one. Conjuring Baba, the Gold Digger Killer, the Death Pledge, Stay Out, and the Black Nun. I can't remember what my other movie is. That's crazy. Oh my God.
People will look you up. They'll find it for you.
Yes. So the
Put it in the
Black
comments
Nun.
if you find out what his last movie is.
Yeah, yeah. That's crazy. No, that's 5. That's 6. That's 6. So it's the Holla If I Kill You, Gold Digger Killer, The Death Pledge, Conjuring Baba, Stay Out, and The Black Nun. And Conjuring
Gotcha.
Baba and The Black Nun, I tried to compete with Tyler Perry, and I shot those 2 movies at the same time in the same 7-day period. And I shoot,
Wow. So feature length shot in 7 days.
yes, 2 of them. And then COVID hit. The day we wrapped on The Black Nun, the next day, the location we were shooting at closed down for COVID.
Wow. Well, very fortunate you got that finished in time. That'd be a bummer if you had to pick that project up a couple years later or something.
Oh,
Yeah, so I actually just this last year, for the first time, wrote and directed a short film. It's a medieval psychological thriller,
okay.
and that was a blast, man. I was the writer and the director on it. I partnered with Studio Blue Jay, um, and it was just a great experience to take something from like my brain and then
Yes.
see the final product after it was completely edited and with the music and all the different angles and stuff. It was a blast, but we managed to do it. It was like a 25-minute film, I think, and we did it for $1,000.
Okay.
So that's very cheap as far as film is concerned, I believe. But how are you going about funding your films?
Well, I'll tell you. I uh, started off leaning on other people's knowledge. When I was a producer, I found these brothers in a horror magazine, and they talked about how they made these low budget movies. So I reached out to them. I said, I can provide the finances, I can provide the location, and I can provide the cast. And we put it together. And at the time, it was under $5,000 production budget. And they walked me through. And one of the biggest savings is to shoot around your resources, right? So the Black Nun, my biggest resource is right here, my house. So we shot most of the story in the house. I also have a garage. I draped it up and I used that in Stay Out. And My wife's office building, she told him I was a filmmaker. So we shot in the hallways with the lights flickering up and down the stairs. That was an exterior. Um, and then the Death Pledge, I shot it in a park, which was really risky because even though it doesn't rain every year at the same time in Florida, it decided to rain 2 of my 4 days of
Yeah.
shooting. So I think if to answer your question, right, is I've always found a location that could connect to my story.
Mm.
The first one, Holla If I Kill You, we used to do comedy nights at this club, and they happened to lose their liquor license. And they were like, well, we're not doing anything. You come in, and we shot the whole movie there. And the only other location was my friend's bedroom. And we didn't even go through the whole house. We just shot in his bedroom. And that was it. Changed a few posters on 2 of the walls, and we were there. And that saves a lot of money. And then the other thing is write a contemporary story. Because if you try to write a period piece, then you got set design, you got costumes, and probably even more talented actors. When you do contemporary, you just need somebody that can act. Sometimes they can wear their own clothes, and that saves a lot.
For my film, it's interesting because we like you were saying, shooting around the locations that you have. My the studio owner, Josh, Studio Blue Jay, his family had like a 40-acre farm or something like that we were able to just go and shoot out there. Looks like a medieval forest. And then talking about the rain as well, we got stormed on crazy thunder and lightning storms. One of the nights we were supposed to be shooting, his car got stuck in like 3 feet of mud for 2 weeks. Like it was a crazy experience, but fun nonetheless. So, let's talk real quick about your short story, Cannabis Man, and that's part of a larger collection, right?
Yes, so Cannabis Man is was selected to help launch this magazine that has still yet to let me know when they're going to come out, but it came from my film elements. I was at a film festival, and they broke us out into groups, and they said, "Yeah, pitch a movie," and I had Cannabis Man on my mind for in the moment, and I said, "Hey, what about Cannabis Man?" And I had been doing this was like 2008, 2009. I had been doing a lot of research on the legalization of marijuana in California, so that was laying in my head, and um, I didn't pick up the pen to write the story until 2023, 2 years ago, and I had always had this story, and I was like, I need to do it. I had a friend of mine who was a middle school teacher, and he had uh, suffered a episode with multiple sclerosis, and he was always a nice guy. So in the rehab, he read my books, and we got closer on that. And I started telling him about Cannabis Man, and he's like, I used marijuana to help me rehabilitate my brain, and it helps. And I said, wow, I thought something like that was possible. But because, in California, it's not just recreational. They won the recreational by trying to argue the medicinal and the
Mm-hmm.
rehabilitative abilities of marijuana. So I started reading up on that, and I found this guy, Carl Hart, I think it is. He's a professor at Columbia University, and he argues for cannabis use and actually all drugs, right? So he's taken all of them. And it was just so much material that when I sat down to make it a real story, I had enough springboard to write an adventurous interplanetary story of Cannabis Man. So he is able to use marijuana and travel outside of his body. Um, Almost like you remember Doctor um dang, uh the one that was remember The Shining?
I've actually never seen The Shining.
Okay, so they did a sequel to The Shining, and I can't remember the name of it. But in that story, you actually saw the people laying in their beds, and their spirits would travel around the world, and they would interact. And
So it's like
that
an astral
totally,
projection out of body experience.
yes, but it's not a artificial astral projection. It's a real projection. And so that's what Cannabis Man allows us to do. And I actually have a comic book that I'm working on. The illustrator's moving on it. And he actually is like a superhero that fights Freddy Krueger's for say. You
Hmm.
know, I remember in Washington D.C., where I used to visit my grandmother. They had this children's hospital, and they had did a story on how they allow the children to draw like Godzilla and other monsters, and make pretend that monster was their disease. And
Hmm.
I thought, wow, what if the disease was a monster in their head? Who would help these people fight it? Cannabis Man.
Awesome. So he's an astral projection superhero, kind of, is what you're saying.
Yes, yes.
That's awesome. Um, have you drawn any of these astral projection things from any of your own experiences?
Uh, None of mine have been manipulative. I've always had two really good ones. I can't even remember the second one because I don't even want to remember it. But the
Mhm.
first one, I've always been really tired and been able to see my body while I was not able to move. And it's a really irritating experience. And I was fortunate that my leg was dangling off the side of the bed, and I was able to dangle it enough to get myself awake. But that experience is what I definitely draw on to inspiration to write Cannabis Man. And there was another movie. I don't know if you heard of Altered States.
Never seen that. No.
Yes, I'm an old guy, so this is it's definitely a watch. They go in a different direction, and they don't stop with cannabis. And cannabis is their entry drug, but then they start going into mushrooms and all types of uh, um, um, drugs, all right, psychedelics and stuff. And he actually in the story reverts into his base DNA. So you know how we evolved from cavemen? He devolves into a caveman. But
Mhm.
outside of that, there's a lot of similarities in the story because the guy is very Cannabis Man. He's very fascinated with drugs, with
Mhm.
cannabis per se.
I've never done any mushrooms. I've never done any LSD. I've never done any DMT, anything like that. But I've heard that
Thank
people
God.
describe, gnomes running around when you're on shrooms, and there's entities that you interact with when you're on DMT. Do you have him interacting with any of these entities, and or what do you think that people in our world are experiencing when they're doing these substances?
Well, right now the short story is just really his ability, him using it. And it's a short story, just him using it once, and he travels to another planet. Um, Actually, the planet interacts with him and helps him save people here in this plane. And in the comic book, he takes on coronavirus, which is manifested in the kid's head as a sumo wrestler. And that's it for now. But if I get a chance to write more, I definitely have those aspirations, no doubt. And the movie I was thinking of was Doctor Sleep. That was the prequel, a sequel to Shining. In
Okay.
Shining, they were able to communicate with each other through their dreams, but also they traveled to each other's dream experience and they shared dreams.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'll have to check those out. I know Shiny is a very famous movie, and I kick myself every time somebody talks about it. And I just remember the scene where he's
Yep.
coming through the door with the axe. Right, that's The Shining.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll have to sit down and watch that sometime.
It is definitely a
So
classic.
awesome. So, I recently watched one of your YouTube videos that you posted within the last couple days. And it was
Uh-oh.
titled, What is More Effective, High or Low Sci-Fi? And, I loved the way you were walking through some of your, talking to the camera, talking through some of your thought processes. But one of the things you were talking about was how you're a sci-fi writer, but also a social activist at heart. So,
Yes.
what impact or what messages do you want to have dispersed through the outputs of your creativity to modern society?
So I am a sci-fi connoisseur. Let's say that. Okay. When I look at Star Trek, I see more than just them putting a diverse bridge together. I see them deliberately making a message to the world that Earth civilizations need to work together to go out into the future. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, that is a activist with a message, you know? Um, and, many times the messages are clear when they're dystopian, when it's Terminator and stuff like that. But the good messages are there too. And so in two of my stories, like in all of my stories, I really have something like that going on. But I'm in the process of writing a comic book series for my Fingernails comic book. And Fingernails is a gargoyle who, before she became a gargoyle, was very clairvoyant. She could see spirits, she could see ghosts. She couldn't really talk to them, but she could see them. And she was never scared of ghosts. And every time I watch like Amityville Horror or Poltergeist, I feel, damn, ghosts get such a bad rep. And when I was in college, I had four grandparents, four grandmothers, right? All my grandparents divorced and remarried. So I had four of them. And my closest one, who spoiled me, she passed away when I was in college. And the next day, I called my mother and said, hey, how's Grandma Sally? I just had a beautiful experience with her in my dream last night. It felt like she was bathing me like she used to bathe me when I was a child. And it felt, like white and pure. And she said, yeah, well, your grandmother passed away. And I was like, wow, that was her coming to visit me. And I used to be scared, and I still do get scared. I'm going to see the Wolfman this weekend, and I'm prepared to be scared a little bit. But I'm not, I got significantly less scared when I had that experience with my grandmother, because not only did it give me a chance to see the afterlife, but also accept that there's an ancestor role that our loved ones and people who come before us really play. And I said, wow, we always call these people the dead. We call them ghosts. There's a ghost in the house. Run. But to be honest, if the ghost can slam a door, the ghost can also turn on the gas, right? So there's opportunities for the ghost to do good and bad things. So I do a lot of comic book conventions, right? And I talk to paranormalists that, they always like to have them at comic conventions. And they tell us, real deal, Ghostbusters is propaganda. Because when they go out and around, they're always finding ghosts that are trying to communicate to loved ones, trying to do something good. This stereotype that they're all demons, right, is a, a popular trend, but it's not reality. Yes, there's the Amityville Horror, sure, but I'm pretty sure if there was a ghost whisperer out there, they might be able to give that ghost some therapy, you know. But to be honest, like in the Black community, when we hear a door slam in the house, our aunt will say, oh, that's your uncle. Don't worry about him. They have this real casual relationship with spirits. And it's not get out the house and run like Eddie Murphy said. It's not. And so we've been able to accept two different types of worlds. One where it's Scooby-Doo, it's Ghostbusters, and then the other one is our reality, is our ancestors. So in my story with Fingernails, the whole goal of their group is to prove that all ghosts aren't bad. So she teams up with a ghost, and the other partner is studying to be a witch, and they have a cat, and she talks to all of them. And the second book that's out now is Ghosts in the Projects. So in Tampa, Florida, they found an African burial ground underneath a housing project. And so I took that and said, what if those ghosts were haunting the housing project? That would be a case for Fingernails. And Fingernails goes out there and shows that those ghosts aren't bad and actually helps them cross over to the afterworld. And that's kind of simple message. I want to show people that all ghosts aren't bad.
Okay, awesome. You made a couple other comments that led me to believe you seem to want to empower the African American community in their creativity. So, if we had some African American young creatives watching this right now, what would you say directly to them?
Well, the state of science fiction and probably even the state of horror has reached a plateau of similar stories. So much that my top movies last year were all remakes, reboots, or sequels, right? The amount of original stories are hard to come out. As an African American and pretty much any other I say white male storyteller, your authentic stories are unique. And just like I said, all ghosts aren't bad, I didn't say all black ghosts aren't bad. I want everybody. My message isn't necessarily for black people only. It's for everybody. Because I'm pretty sure your grandmother, when she passed, or somebody is looking out for you, you know. So that's really my message, is that we need to look into our perspectives and share them with the world, because just as I've enjoyed Star Wars, my space story can be enjoyed by the world, and it's going to be a different perspective. I have a space. I give you an example. I have a space universe that I built around a planet called Planet Akibalon. Right, Akibalon was the first name for Africa. Right, and it's a Middle Eastern Arabic African name, right? So it's not necessarily Black African, right? But that's the oldest one. So I made my universe built around that. And in my universe, there is organic and inorganic space travelers. So Cannabis Man is an organic space traveler. So I looked at the ability for us to you reach the full complete use of our brains, and maybe in that complete use we can travel outside of our body and through different planets like Cannabis Man. Then I also said one of the space stories I like is Avatar with the blue people, James Cameron's. And just as they travel through those flying dragons, I said, what if, and I grew up more than just on Godzilla. There was a flying turtle that traveled through space called Gamera, and he's just as big as Godzilla. He's just, I think it was the Japanese version. And I said, what if my space travelers were to be able to communicate with those big Gameras and travel inside them? And so when they came to Earth, you would see a big space animal, whatever is a turtle, and in my universe, they're crabs or hornet beetles, right? Lands, and people come out of the inside of that body. And that's where, so my son is a big Warhammer player. And as he was choosing his army and the different class warriors, I said, why don't I make one myself? So mine has different class, but they're all organic. There's nothing metal ships. I have metal ship people in my universe, but they're from Earth, you know. But the ones from outer space, they travel like Cannabis Man, and they travel in big gammas. And I think for me, that was paying tribute to my indigenous American culture and an African culture that I may not be related to. But I was very inspired by the Dogon people, and I wanted something like that to be there. And I see them not using physical technology and physical science, but looking into their body's development and body science, you know, and that's what that represents. So going back to my message to young people, yeah, I think for young African American creators and other creators of color, or just even women writers, female writers, look into your authentic perspective. Wash out all of what you've seen in movies, because we need new perspectives, and bring that to the world, whatever that is. And
Awesome.
that's my message.
I love that perspective. Any final comments before I let you go?
Well, my comic book is still in the stores, The Last Harlemite. It's a 4-part series. Please check it out. Upcoming, I'm in the Space Funk anthology, which is the first Black writers anthology approaching science. Space. And I have my space traveling organic people in that story. So
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. Thanks for sharing your perspective. Everybody, we had Jeff Carroll.